Rashid, get
Yes, ma'am.
started. We're live.
Hello. Hello, Dr. Hart. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, Dr. Ali.
So today we are here to talk about active listening, right? Active listening. Sometimes it's deep listening. Um, so I think I'll just ask you from jump. Um, I guess, how do you feel like people are listening to you?
I feel like there are context clues, so there could be nonverbal, like eye contact and like what you're doing, nodding, and all of those things. There could be action or follow-up questions. Follow-up questions are the best in terms of what, following up and asking like what the person needs, are you sharing because you want someone to listen? Are you sharing because you want advice? Or, and addressing the things that were mentioned.
Hmm.
Um, and I think even, summarizing the points as well is a good way to know as well.
Yep, yep. And yeah, so for me, like you, for me, I think it's for me, I like to be heard. So and it's very important for me to feel like the person is hearing me and receiving me. So I think yeah, the eye contact and and sometimes obviously everybody likes a smile. Like you would like people to receive what you're saying in a positive light. You're often not trying to upset somebody or have somebody have a negative feeling. But I think yeah, I think what you're saying in terms of looking at the person, making eye contact. I think another important thing is right being quiet while the other person is talking because it's hard for both people to talk and feel heard. Um, so I think also not interrupting. Um, and so I think those are kind of the immediate tenets. And I think beyond that, I think it's about how you listen, right? So listening from a place of kind of just nothingness or listening from a neutral place, because it's so easy to be in a space and for your mood or your feelings to overwhelm what you're hearing. So I think that's another big thing. I think also just listening without thinking about what you're going to say next. I know for many of us, we are trained like in a business meeting, at work, or even in a conversation, right? You're already thinking about what you're going to say. And I think sometimes we have to shut that off or at least turn that volume down so that you can actually just listen to the person and then process and then respond to them. And I think that's how you show somebody you're listening. And so I guess I'll ask you a follow up question. How do you show people that you're listening, right? So you talked about how you like to be heard or you're being heard, but how do you show somebody that you're listening to them?
Well, it depends on the scenario and the person, but um, especially if someone's sharing something that's not the best, I typically ask what's the best way to show up for them? What's the best way to support them? And I've sent out several messages of the like recently to people about that. Like I hear like this horrible situation, but what do you think is helpful? Um,
Yeah, that's great.
and
I think
I
that's a
think
great.
it's important not to go into solving mode. And people might not want that, or they just want to feel like they don't have to process it all in their mind and they just want another body to listen. And it's really sometimes hard to find anyone who will listen to you. Um, if it's a different scenario, I think that I address it by responding to the things that they said uh, and move on from there.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great. I love how you distinguish between, right, the context clues, right? So while you're talking to somebody, I think it's very important, like you said, to not impose your opinion or a solution unless you're prompted, right? So I think it's a great idea to kind of, and I think that's one of the things that I do to show that I'm listening. I always try to repeat back what I'm hearing, right? So, like for instance, I heard you say that you do two things when you're listening. One, you either kind of just listen from the place of listening. You try not to like put a solution on it. You don't try to problem solve. You try to check in with the person. And then I also heard you say, and if you have checked in and they're like, yes, please help me out. Like I called you for your opinion. Then you kind of go in, but you do things are really important. So now I kind of want to tweak the conversation and I want you to think about you being upset. So now you're upset, meaning somebody's upset you, somebody has made you mad. Now, how do you feel like um, you know you're heard, or how do you want to be heard or listened to?
Well, those are like two different questions.
Hmm.
So, if I'm upset, I want someone to listen and um say they understand why.
I
Because
get it.
try to explain why I feel the way that I do if I'm upset. And again, this is only if I care. Like I've been upset, sometimes you've been branded or you've been da da da. You don't need to explain anything.
Right.
But it's like, but if this is a scenario where you're trying to foster additional communication, and it depends, and it's funny, as an aside, like the one time I side swiped a car. Yeah, the other time I hit like poles, so because I don't have the best depth perception. But anyway, and I was just calm, and the guy like I hit was yelling at me, and he was like, "I'm gonna call the cops." I'm like, "Okay." And I was just calm, and I was like, "That's fine." Then it was funny because when the cop came, the good dude was so irate, and he came to talk to me, the police officer, and he was like, "I'm so sorry that you having to deal with this. I know it was an accident. I'm gonna be as fast as possible. Let me know if you need anything." And he was totally ignoring the other person and just talking to me, and it was my fault. And that was one of those scenarios where it showed me that like not responding in anger or meeting that guy in
Yeah.
anger, like,
How
it
you
was
met him.
not. Yeah, it wasn't the best, and then I was treated well. I didn't get any ticket, it was private property, so it wasn't even my fault at the end of the day because it was in a parking garage and not on the street or whatever, and there's different rules, but anyway, um, it was good to just rest in my own energy, at peace. Yes, I accepted the scenario. I was gonna wait for whatever was gonna happen. I felt safe. I didn't feel like I was in personal danger. I was just getting yelled at, but the guy yelled at me from a distance. He didn't come close to me.
Right.
So I was fine. And so yeah, and that's an ideal, but of course, like we all have non-ideal, and typically, at least for me, it's for people I care about more, who it's like harder to remember all the things that I'm so good at in the like external world. And but I know that I've time and so many examples of when I never got mad and it was fine. you know
Right, right. But I think you said a number of things there that are very important to active listening, right? So one,
Mhm,
you did what you always said, right? You were paying attention to how the person was talking to you, their tone.
mhm,
You also had
mhm.
awareness of the situation. So clearly you knew an accident had occurred. So the person
Mhm.
was upset because some damage had happened to their property, right? And
Yep.
you then brought yourself to a place where you're like, okay, let me relax, let me be calm.
Mhm,
Like you took some ownership
mhm,
and accountability of what was going on. And then you also were empathetic, right? So you weren't like that guy was irate for no reason. He was a clown. Like, you didn't use any negative tones or kind of thoughts towards him. And I think
Mhm.
that goes a long way, right? To not bring an unnecessary emotion to an already emotionally charged situation, especially if there's upset, if there's hurt feelings. And I think those are some of the really important things to do. I think it's also important to repeat back what you're hearing. Of course, in that irate situation, there was nothing for you to do, right? But I feel like when you're with a partner, somebody you care about, whether it's a family member, a romantic partner, a good friend, I think it's very important to respond back to them and say, "Hey, I hear you're upset." Like in your example with the car, right? "Hey, I hear you're upset. I understand that was my fault. That was my bad. I would be mad too, right? From a place of empathy. Like, I'm sure you weren't expecting that, and I'm sorry I damaged your property. Let's get this resolved. I want to get you to be in a better place." Right. And so those are some things you can do, you could have done had that person been in a more right, a more safe space. But I'm trying to give this example from the place of how you do that in an active relationship that you care about, as you kind of described, right? So I think being able to do the things that we're doing, right, saying yes, being able to acknowledge, being able to be empathetic, and then also summarizing the person's comments or their ideas in general. So, like the way you summarize that, I loved it because in the end, you talked about how your reaction and what you brought to an intense situation, right? An accident, somebody's upset, but because of how you handled it, in the end, it led to a better outcome for you, right? And
Yeah.
ultimately,
Yeah.
and ultimately, I think that's where we're up to, right? When we're active listening, you want the best outcome for you, because if the best outcome for you is likely going to be the best outcome for the person you care about, right? And so
Right.
I think that's for me, active listening, especially in partnership, and when you really care about the person you're listening to. I think it's about how you do that together and how a conversation really reverbs, right? So you have the ability to control the situation from your side and bring some calm and peace to an upset situation. And so I think for me, I'm always present to that and aware of how I enter into a conversation as much as I can, right? There's going to be sometimes where it happens like this, and you're vexed, and you're going to go in, guns ablaze, and then you still have an opportunity, right, during the whole time to kind of pause and hear how that person is listening to you and say, "Hey, I know you got it. I know you get I'm vexed, and let me dial it down because I think you get me because you're actively listening." So I think it's a reverb, and it's a yeah, it's definitely a partnership, right? It's a ping pong match in the conversation, and in a happy way, in a healthy way. So let me ask you this: when you are angry, how do you know you need to, like, shut it down, right? Because sometimes a conversation needs a pause, right? And you need to come back to a conversation. So, what are some of the clues and cues for you that
Oh, for me, is when I feel this fury of rage. And, I used to just, sometimes when people are mad, you say crazy things that you say things to intentionally hurt someone else. And I try my hardest not to do that, because that's not really what the argument is about. Like, a lot of times when you're mad, any kind of insecurity, any kind of ammunition, you'll start like saying that. And that's not constructive and stuff. So if I feel this rage, I usually try to quiet myself, get out of the situation,
right,
and I prefer to talk about it when I'm calm. And a lot of people don't like that approach, but it's like at least helps me ensure that I'm always resting in my integrity of how I pride myself on communicating with others. But, some people don't feel like if you don't communicate immediately that you're not valuing it. Whereas I'm understanding that I want to make sure that I'm always in respect and always in compassion. And if the rage is there, I'm often out of that space at that moment.
Right, right. And so yeah, I love what you said there, right? I think having that awareness and I think always being in communication, right? I think part of active listening, I also say it's also healthy communication, right? So I think there's always opportunity in any conversation to say, "Hey, I'm so upset. I'm no longer able to communicate healthy, or I'm no longer able to listen healthy, right?" And I think you're able to pause and say, "Can we pause this? Can we revisit it?" Right? And I think we as people and as people in couples and partnership have to make that room and space for one another to be able to give that space for each other to say, "Hey, I need a pause, time out, let me take a beat, let's revisit this in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and call it." Right. I think that's a very important part of healthy communication, which is kind of the ultimate goal of active listening is healthy communication. And hopefully that leads to more resolve in conversations and more empathy, more compassion, the words you use, right? More caring, more love, and more self-care of each other and ourselves when we have disagreement, when we have upset. So I think that covers it. That covers kind of what I wanted to discuss today. I know
Well,
it's
I don't think so.
okay. Well,
Cuz you
please,
said you were going to provide like a list of strategies
a list of
to
strategies.
do active listening, and unless that's like a recap.
No, so yeah, I can definitely do that. So I will give a recap. I think the 10 active strategies I would offer are things that we demonstrated today during this conversation. One would be face the speaker and have eye contact, right? I think number two would be listen to nonverbal cues too, right? So the head shakes, the nods, the smiles, the eyes, the ears, even if people, whatever mannerisms people may have. Number three is don't interrupt, right? I think we're having a conversation and we did a great job, even though we're sharing this space. But I talked, then I stopped, and then you interjected. Number four is listen without judging or jumping to conclusions, right? I think it's so easy to, again, insert our emotions or our judgments onto things. Number five is in that same vein. While you're listening, don't start planning what to say next. Really just listen, hear the person out, and then respond, even if it takes you a moment to process and get back to them. Um, Number six, I would say, is show that you're listening, right? Whether it's a head nod, a smile, yeah, I get it, right? Keep your words limited to not interrupt, but just show the person that you're listening. Number seven, again, it's related to some of the other things, is don't impose your opinions or solutions. Some people just want to be heard, as you said. Not everybody wants a solution. They don't want to problem solve. Sometimes they just want to get it out. So they don't want to hear your opinion or your solution. Number eight, as you're doing right now, stay focused, right? Kind of lean forward, listen, be active. Don't be distracted. Don't be looking all over the place. Don't pick up your phone. Stay focused and engage in the conversation. Number nine, I would say ask questions, be curious, ask people, the things that you ask, like, do you want help? Do you want a solution? How can I be of service to you right now? Like, what do you need from me in this moment? Right? Or ask them, I'm hearing this. Is that accurate? Is there any other way you'd want to describe it? Right? Ask them questions, be curious. And the last thing is paraphrase and summarize. So kind of give the person back a summary. So like how I heard your story around your car accident, I kind of reverbed it and gave it back to you, and you were like, yeah, that's it, right? And so that's how you kind of track that you're on the same page. And I think above all, I would say be gentle with yourself, be kind, because this is practice, right? It's like anything you do. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And sometimes it's hard, especially when you're upset, especially when it's somebody you love and you care about. It's hard to hear that you're doing something wrong. It's hard to hear, that your partner's upset when you just want to resolve it for them and they may not want you to resolve it. So I think just keep practicing, keep doing it, keep active, um, be on the court. If you're not on the court, you can't win the game. That's how I always think. So I would say that's how I would summarize kind of the 10 ways. And yeah, be well, stay in practice.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ali, for that great discussion.
I appreciate you as well, Dr. Hart.
Okay, bye.
Take care.